This is Malsberg's Spinning the Law with attorney Kendell Coffey.
The State of Arizona versus Jodi Ann Arias, verdict, count 1. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn, in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do find the defendant as to count 1, first-degree murder, guilty. 5.
All right, there you go. That was the verdict a couple of days ago. In the Jodi Arias trial, she was found guilty of premeditated murder, first degree, in the murder of Travis Alexander, her ex-boyfriend or boyfriend. Joining us now, as you know, is Kendell Coffey, the great attorney and author of the great book called Spinning the Law, and we're spinning the law with him. Hey, Kendell, how are you? Great, Steve. Just super. I know there's probably nobody busier than you, so I hope you know how much we all appreciate your time when you do this, because it's one of my favorite segments, and I know you're very, very busy. But I don't know if you watched the verdict live, we had it live here on the air, but again, since you're so busy, you probably didn't. But what was your reaction? I guess it's the right verdict, but were you surprised at all?
It's hard to be surprised. I mean, starting out with the fact that she lied for 2 years, saying it was these intruders and all kinds of different stories, and just the self-defense with 30 gory stab wounds, a shot to the head. It was just, an appalling defense. Now, the defense lawyer did everything he could to try to get it to a manslaughter, sort of a crime of rage and passion, or even second-degree murder. But at the end of the day, when you combine that much brutality with that much lying, that the jury just isn't going to accept anything but first-degree murder. And so it wasn't surprising. And now, of course, she's got a pretty bleak trial ahead of her on the sentencing phase, where the jury will decide whether it's life or death.
Yeah, well, I want to get into that. I just wanted to talk about how unusual this whole thing has been. And, of course, at the sentencing phase, which was supposed to start yesterday, someone called in a bomb threat and said the second she walks into the building, they're going to blow the courtroom up. So the SWAT teams came in, the bomb-sniffing dogs came in, and now it's been postponed indefinitely. I don't know if the nut who called it in is doing it in support of her or against her. I don't have any idea. But here's what she said, and you got to tell me after we hear this just how crazy this all is. Here's what she said to a Phoenix Fox News reporter who had access to her for almost an hour right after the verdict was read. And this is what she said about choosing the death penalty over life in prison.
Well, the worst outcome for me would be natural life. I would much rather die sooner than later. Longevity runs in my family, and I don't want to spend the rest of my natural life in one place. I'm pretty healthy, I don't smoke, and I would probably live a long time. So that's not something I'm looking forward to. I said years ago that I'd rather get death than life, and that still is true today. I believe death is the ultimate freedom, so I'd rather just have my freedom as soon as I can get it.
So you're saying you actually prefer getting the death penalty to being in prison for life?
Yes.
All right. So before we even figure out how this is going to play with the jury, and was she being real or was she trying to psych the jury out, and how on earth does a lawyer let her do this, or does a lawyer have any control over this?
Well, you've got to assume that no lawyer would ever let his client talk to the media, not just in a murder case, not just in an incredibly high-profile murder case, but basically any kind of a criminal proceeding. It's always a disastrous mistake. And, of course, she was talking much earlier in this case to national interviews where she was telling people about the original false story that, there were these intruders that did it. So there she is committed, on national television with a complete pack of lies. So you think of every defendant that's gotten out there publicly that comes to mind recently. Blagojevich, he did a whole tour of practically every television show that would talk to him. Right. And obviously the Jerry Sandusky thing, I mean, that still jumps out at you, where he gets on the Bob Costa interview. Right. And we won't forget that. And frankly, George Zimmerman didn't do himself a lot of good. Getting on Sean Hannity with some comments that, some people are going to react to comments that saying that there was no remorse in the guy or no sadness. Even if you're innocent, you ought to be sad and regretful that a human being
all of
lost
these
his life.
interviews, all as we saw with Sandusky and whatnot, and with her, Jodi Arias, they were all used in the trial. They were all able to be used in the trial, right?
Absolutely. And some people, and I had a client in one case who actually had gone on TV before I represented him with a TV interview that got played right in the middle of the trial. It's a long story as to how we got him acquitted, but the short version
do we know
don't
who
let
it,
a client do it.
Do we know who it was? Would we know the name? Was it a high
No,
profile?
it was a high profile locally.
Oh, okay.
It was an anti-Castro freedom fighter. But again, what we learn is it's always a mistake. It can be used. It will be used. It's dramatic footage when the prosecutor can play it in front of the jury.
Well, how will this, do you believe, be used? I mean, if she's true to form or true to herself, or if we could believe her, then she'll get up and say, or have her lawyer say, my client requests the death penalty, no further arguments, goodbye. But I doubt that's going to happen. So how do you think the jury will view this, that she's playing a game with them? Because you know how manipulative she is.
Well, I think that the jury is going to assume that. I mean, there's just been too many strange turns. And they saw her for how many days on the stand and decided at the end of all of her claims and professions and protestations that she was guilty of first-degree murder. So there's not much she can do to help herself. That being said, her lawyers are going to fight like crazy because, they're going to try to save her life in spite of her. And the one thing they've got going for them is the way the death penalty system works. If they can get a juror or two to say life, then the death penalty is not going to be invoked.
Right. It's got to be unanimous, right? Yeah.
It has to be unanimous in the Arizona sentencing phase. And there can be a lot of situations where a jury doesn't have too much trouble finding first-degree murder, convicting on all the charges, but sometimes struggles with life and death. I'll give you two examples of one of them is a guy who basically wanted to be put to death, Zacharias Masawi. Some
so-called 19th hijacker, yeah.
So-called 19th hijacker.
Yeah.
He went in there, pled guilty to everything, and basically, wanted a martyrdom. And one or two of the jurors said no. So he's in Supermax in Colorado for life. Another one was Terry Nichols, who was the second participant, the accomplice in the Oklahoma City bombing, who went to two capital trials, one federally and one in the state system. And both times, despite the monstrous dimensions of the loss of life in Oklahoma City bombing, there was a juror, at least one, that said no death penalty for this guy.
Well, do you think that the fact that she was on the stand so long, even though they didn't believe her, and it's kind of, I don't want to use the word like her, because I'm sure nobody likes her, but do you think that could influence that the more exposure they had to her, she becomes more of at least a sympathetic figure and more likely to have one or two say no to death?
I do. I think there's going to be somebody that thinks she's warped, she's crazy, that there were some that, sure, ultimately the jury found that she committed first-degree murder. But I just think having somebody right in front of you for so long can create almost a perverse familiarity, a combination, mostly horror for some people, but for others, some kind of odd connection. And
right.
So ultimately that could be what saves her. Again, it just takes one juror.
Right. All right. Well, we'll see how that pans out. I just hope it doesn't take as long as the trial did. We're talking to Kendell Coffey here on the Steve Malzberg Show, our Spinning the Law segment. Let me ask you about something that came out today. And, we all like to think that we pay our taxes, or if we don't pay our taxes, then we'll get in trouble, and that if we're audited, it's for good reason, or if we apply for something through the government, or in this case the IRS, we're treated in a fair manner. But now it comes out, and the IRS has apologized for basically holding up the applications and giving special scrutiny to the applications of any group seeking tax-exempt status during the 2012 election period that had the word Tea Party or Patriot in their group's name. They've now admitted to this, claim it was all low-level staffers in Cincinnati. It's been stopped, but I don't see where anybody's been fired, and the White House was asked about it today, and they said it's kind of the first they've heard of it. They're not sure when they found out about it. But, this is kind of scary stuff because people have accused the IRS and the government of having these lists for decades in our history.
Well, and it's actually one of the most troubling things I've heard in a while about government. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff we're sort of used to, mistakes, this and that. But think about all the protections that we have supposedly built in to the IRS process, confidentiality. Even federal prosecutors can't immediately get your tax returns. They have to go through a careful process. And the idea that the massive powers of the Internal Revenue Service would be deployed with some kind of, politicized profiling is frightening. And it's not enough to say, oh, gee, sorry. There has to be a thorough examination, which I suspect there will be, and some aggressive level of reforms to make sure this doesn't happen again, because none of us are safe. If any kind of politically oriented profiling by government becomes possible. I mean, it just really tears at the fabric of our republic. No,
absolutely correct. And I wonder if there's any. Do these groups have the ability, if they've been apologized to, and if it's been acknowledged, do they have the ability to sue in any regard or anything like that?
Not much is tougher than suing the
IRS,
the government.
Yeah.
But I mean, what's got to come from is there's got to be. I think we can expect some very aggressive congressional inquiry to get to the bottom of it. But it's not an issue to let go.
No.
Because it's going to happen again. And even if you're a Democrat, you ought to be sitting back and saying, I'm appalled by this because the Republicans will be back in the White House soon enough, and you certainly don't want to see that kind of government targeting switched around.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You have time for one more quick one, and this is kind of crazy. But, the government, the FDA was found, a judge ordered that the FDA should make the morning after pill, the Plan B one-step, available for girls of all ages in the drugstores right next to everything, the aspirins or wherever, in plain sight, no matter what the age limit. And the Obama administration, the FDA then came out and said, well, we're going to make it 15 for now, and we're going to appeal. And the judge blasted the Justice Department and actually the FDA for putting that 15 age limit on, and saying that the FDA move was a cynical move, an attempt to sugarcoat, quote unquote, this appeal of yours. I'm a little confused here because how could the judge? I mean, if the judge could say. You have to. Don't they have to enforce their order pending appeal? Can't the judge rule on that?
Well, yeah, the judge.
I'm not favoring that. I don't want them to, but I mean, the judge could say, no, you can't make it 15. You got to make it available to everybody pending the outcome of your appeal, right?
Yeah. Well, what they seem to be doing is manipulating the landscape after the judge had entered a ruling, and what you're expected to do is if you appeal it, you got a right to do that. If you disagree, come back to the judge. But apparently they did neither. And what they attempted to do is use an administrative revision in effect to change the basis of the judge's ruling, arguably in order to affect the outcome of the appeal. You're in federal court, play it straight. They got rules. If you want to appeal, appeal. If you want the judge himself or herself to address a change of circumstances, bring that to the judge's attention. It was kind of a backdoor, side door thing that the judge was offended by.
Yeah, he wasn't amused. All right, listen, Kendell, thank you so much, sir. Have a great weekend. I appreciate your time as always.
You too. You're the best, Steve.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. That's Kendell Coffey, ladies and gentlemen.